Hello, party people. Welcome to the live stream. We are here on YouTube. Gonna hit LinkedIn shortly. It is connecting right now. Now, just giving you a warning if you are on YouTube, sometimes this streaming service gets a little wonky in the beginning and it might be a little bit blurry, especially if you're watching on the replay, but stick with it because it's gonna clear up. I promise. It usually clears up in a few seconds or a few minutes. And we are diving into a great topic today, and actually all of this month. We are talking about script revision, which is super, super, super important as a screenwriter. And there are things that you don't want to skip about this process because script revision is likely where you are actually going to spend most of your time when it comes to writing. So let's dive in. My name is Kristen Iris Johnson. I am a showrunner, film producer, and screenwriter, as well as the CEO of Black Screenwriter Alliance, where we bring together emerging Black film and TV writers to elevate their writing craft, confidently build industry relationships, and forge their own paths in the industry as Black creators, but with allies, because your community is super, super important. And that is what we create inside Black Screenwriter Alliance. You can check us out 7 days for free at blackscreenwriteralliance.mn.co. But we are here today talking about revision, and we're actually talking about this in the community. So I am sprinkling this theme here to the YouTube channel so that you guys can learn some things as well. But we are definitely within the community diving into this and building connection around it, right? Support around it, because you need support through the revision process. So guess what? If you have finished your script, congratulations, you made it. That was step one, or step two if you count outlining and development, which you should, because that's also a big part of the process. But revision is really important. Now, if you are writing film and TV is a little bit differently, especially when you get into a writer's room in TV. It moves very, very fast. It often moves much faster than feature films do. But the truth of the matter is, your first draft, that rough draft that you get out, that is like just the beginning. It's that like foundation. A lot of times we call it the vomit first draft or the garbage first draft, and that is with intention, right? To remind you that the first draft does not actually have to be good. It is not even really expected to be good necessarily, especially if you are emerging or you are newer. But once you have that first draft, now there's another phrase: the writing is in the revision. And that is because the revision process is where you really get to refine and elevate your script to something that is not only pitch worthy, but screen worthy. And that is what we want, right? But how do you start tackling that revision? Because revision can feel really, really daunting when you like get through this massive thing where you're like, yes, I got through that first draft, I'm done. And then you're like, I'm not done. I'm not even close. I have all this revision to do. Yes, that's where the real writing happens. Now, personally, I love revision. I feel like that is where I get to play. Like the first draft, I was just like, let me go. And I just write. But the revision is where I feel like I get to play, where I get to like make the characters stronger and the story more cohesive, and where I get to refine the language, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I feel like it really gets to shine, because I could take a little bit more time to like really get into the nitty gritty, where in that first draft, I was just getting it out. Now, some people go really, when they do their first draft, like my first draft tends to be pretty solid because I've been doing this for a while. And when it comes to TV, like you have to pump it out so fast that honestly, your revision process might actually be much shorter than it is in feature film, because television, you have to move really fast because the due dates are so fast. And that is, let me just clarify, I'm talking about when your project is greenlit, it's in motion, you're in like pre-production, you're writing it because they're going to shoot it. I am not talking about when you are writing your pilot and getting ready to pitch it. That process tends to be slower, where you're really conceptualizing, when you're planning out the series, what is it going to look like, what's the tone. That pilot tends to take more time, but then once the show gets greenlit, things tend to move fast. So we're going to be talking about this more from the perspective of you're writing a feature film or a pilot that you want to pitch. I'm not necessarily talking about when you're in the writer's room, because that process is really just going to be determined by your showrunner. So when you are, and like I said, it moves a lot faster. When you are writing that first, that script, feature film or television pilot that you're like, okay, this is something that I want to pitch, either to get greenlit or I want to use this as a sample to get hired for something. You really want to make sure that this is a good, strong piece of writing that also really reflects your skill and your ability. And that means that because you haven't pitched it yet, you actually have time to like put in the intentionality behind that. So that script revision can feel daunting, but here are some steps that I take that I would like to share with you that I think are really good steps to take when you are going through this process. So the first thing is, if you have the time, like if nobody's asking for this project, you finish your first draft, I think it is a good idea to take a break, to take a week or two away from the script so that you can give yourself a rest, you can give yourself some distance from it. The reason why this is really helpful is because you have been so immersed in your story and in the details, and in details that are like that never even made it to the script. Backstory that never made it to the script, details that never made it to the script because they're not part of this story. They're part of the greater context of the world. So what can happen is when you write your script and you go right into revision, which sometimes you have to, you are coming to it with all of this knowledge, and you may not realize that the things that you're putting on the page are actually not as clear as you think they are. And there's actually a later part of this revision process where you get to really look into that and nail that. But right now on that first read, if you take a break, it gives you a little bit of distance so that you can come to it just a little bit fresher, a little bit with a little bit more of a outside perspective, even though you're still very much on the inside. And this allows you to see it with a more of a fresh perspective on what's working, what's not working. So I think taking a break is really important, but don't take too long, because what some people do is they write that first draft, they take a break, they get intimidated about the revision, and then they start working on something else, and then they never come back and actually finish it. And you don't want to do that. You want to come back and finish it. The first draft is not a finished script. I'm going to say it again. Your first draft is not a finished script. It is a first draft. It is a rough draft. It is supposed to be revised from there. So take a break if you can, if you have that time, a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then come back. And what I do is I reread and I start with marking what are the biggest issues. And by biggest issues, I don't mean typos. You can fix typos later. Biggest issues, I mean story structure, and character. And these things are almost always connected. Many times, and I mean, if you're finding plot holes, you want to address those. If you're finding like, okay, my act 1 is 40 pages and my act 2 is only 30, that is a big issue. You need to fix that problem. That is a structural issue. If you're finding that your character, one of your main characters, like disappeared in the beginning of Act 2 and then didn't show up again until Act 3, that is something you need to address. These are like the big story issues, and these are story character structure issues that go together that need to be addressed. And the reason I like to do that first is because these are the biggest problems in the script. The story is Your story has to be solid. Your proofreading you can fix, writing the word craft you can fix, but you really need to get the story down, because if you start working on like the word craft, or you start working on like bits of dialogue here and there, but you've got a big story issue, you could end up wasting your time. You could be working on dialogue in a scene that later on, when you address the story issue, you're like, oh, I don't even need this scene. This scene's got to go. It's not working in the story. So then you just wasted your time. So I think that it is best. I think that it is best to do your address your big story structure and character issues first, because those are the things that will tend to have a ripple effect through the rest of your script. Those are the things that are going to tend to mean that scenes will change, sequences of scenes will change, that you may have to change motivation. For example, there was a project that I produced. The writers, they had been trying to get this project. It was a Christmas movie. They'd been trying to get this project greenlit for like 2 years, and everybody just kind of kept saying the same thing, like, "Yeah, like it's pretty good, but like it needs more conflict, or it's kind of slow in the middle. Like it needs more." There was actually literally some of the feedback was it needs more. Like, what does that mean, right? Now, nobody could really nail what the issue was, because a lot of the people who were giving feedback don't really know how to give good feedback, or how to, like, they can spot that there's something that's not quite right, but they could not really name what the problem was or how to fix it. So when I came to and I read it, I was like, you guys have a big character development problem. Your character motivation is not making sense. This character is doing crazy stuff with absolutely no motivation whatsoever. And it's reading as this is a convenient conflict for your main character, but it's not being driven by anything. So I address, like, I'm like, everybody is saying you need more conflict, you need more this, blah, 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 because they don't have the words to say your characters are not developed enough and that you need to go back to the drawing board. Now, they were pissed. They did not like hearing that, right? And they were really frustrated because they were like right on the verge of, like, it was like the production company was like, are we going to greenlight it? Are we not? And I was like, y'all can greenlight it, but you're not going to be able to sell it later, because this is a fundamental problem. So they were not happy, because to them, I think I looked like the barrier to them, getting greenlit. But they did go back. They really worked on the character development. I worked with them on their character development, and it transformed the story. And when they did that, they were like, "Oh my God, this is so much better." And this is really the spirit of what we were trying to bring when we first started this project, that it had gotten, like, convoluted and changed over 2 years because everybody was giving them incomplete feedback and ineffective feedback. So they were like, this is so much better. We feel so good about this. I read it, I felt good about it. Everybody else who read it felt good about it. And then 2 months later, they got greenlit by BET, who had previously rejected them for that specific project. And that project, it got greenlit. It shot that winter, and then it came out the following winter, which was actually 2024. So it aired on BET Plus. And this is what I mean about, like, this is why you have to address the story and the character issues first, because their big problem, because it was two writers, their big problem was the characters were not developed enough to where their motivations made sense, where the conflict made sense, and where they could really create stakes that the audience was going to feel, because the stakes didn't really mean anything to the characters originally. So when they were able to change that, it did change things. It changed scenes, it changed character dynamics, it changed relationships. They got rid of characters, they added characters in. Those were big changes that they had to address, but that made the story much more solid. And from there, they were able to do tweaks to fine tune. And that's when they got greenlit. So starting with those big story issues first is, like, really, really beneficial. So so I think addressing that, and there are going to be things that you are probably not going to see that you will eventually want feedback on. But before you get to that, before you get to the feedback, I would say do the best that you can on that first draft. After you address the character, story, and story structure issues, then I would go through and start addressing the smaller things and the things that are not necessary. What isn't working? What scenes do I really, really love, but actually are not serving the story and are slowing it down? What dialogue is not working, or where is it falling flat? Where is the world building not clear? Like, where do I need to clarify something? Because I've got all this information in my head, but it's not actually coming through on the page, right? So where does the world building need to be tightened up? These are the things that will then elevate your script, that will make it cleaner, more concise, that will streamline it. and make the language more concise. And honestly, some of that will also clear out things that you don't need, so you can bring in things that you do, things that like bring in more emotion, whether that is laughter, whether that is, whatever it is. You want to be able to clear out what's not necessary so that you can bring in or add in anything that really does need to be there to elevate your script, elevate your story. So after that, I think it's a good idea to sharpen your word craft. Um, I like to really once I get to that, like I do, like I said, the story first, and then I go into those smaller details. What do I have to call? What isn't needed? What do I like want to keep, but I can cut, and like what absolutely needs to be there. And then it's like, okay, now I'm getting into my word craft, my actual language on the page. How do I elevate my verbs and my adjectives so that they are more visual? How do I guide the director and the DP's eye without directly telling them like camera pans? Because that kind of language takes your reader out of the script. And remember, we are talking about films and pilots that you want to pitch, right? That's kind of the focus here. This is not necessarily when you are further in the process of having a project that is greenlit. So if you're talking about wanting to pitch, it means that you need to have language that draws people in and hooks them and makes them want to be like, oh my God, I have to find out what happens next. So that's where I want to start bringing in, fine tuning my language so that I can draw the reader in and have them experience, right? It's not just about seeing it in their mind's eye. It is about giving them an experience just from reading it on the page. So that is where I tighten up the language. So that's 3, right? So step 1 was like take a break. Step 2 was reread and deal with the biggest story issues, story, character, story structure. And then 3 was like cutting what's not necessary, fine tuning, like kill your darlings, and then fine tuning your dialogue, your world building, things like that. 4, sharpening. So this is actually 4, is sharpening your word craft, elevating your language to draw the reader in. And then I think that is a good time to get feedback. This is where you need to rely on your writing friends, your trusted writing friends, your support, your community, because they are the people, and I'm not talking about your mama who loves everything that you write and she's like, oh my God, my baby is so brilliant, this is so good. Okay, not those people. Like, love your mama, but you need people who are going to give you the real. So you need to have your people who are your support, who can tell you what's working, what's not, who can bring to your attention the things that you are missing or the things that you think are clear but are not. And those are the people that you want to give you feedback. And if you don't have those people, then come check us out in Black Screenwriter Alliance, because that is what we are building, is community and support to be able to give and get feedback, exchange those insights and get different perspectives. So you could check us out at blackscreenwriteralliance.mn.co. And also, if you have your people, still come on in to Black Screenwriter Alliance. Bring your people, because the more of us that there are, the more people, the more allies, the more different views, the more perspectives we have that then you can bring to your project to elevate your project, right? That feedback is super important. So I like to send my script to my trusted people, all right, that I know are going to be real, the people that, and especially if I know someone is really good with one particular area that I'm like, I'm not so sure about this. Like, I did the best that I could, but I think that maybe the tension isn't building enough. If I know someone who's really good with tension and suspense, or if that's what I'm trying to add, then that's someone I want to read. If I have like a particular subject matter, like I have a story right now that I am developing that is in the boxing world, which, I mean, I was in the boxing world, so I have the knowledge. But if I want to really see how that lands for somebody else in that world, then I would send it to someone, a writer friend of mine who was also authentic. Is it feeling genuine? Is there something that I could bring in that I'm missing that would make it feel, even more authentic? And then I can get that feedback. So finding your people and the right people for your project to give you feedback. It doesn't have to be, oh, everybody's an expert in something. You can also send it to someone who's like just really, even if they're not a writer, but they're like really, really good at giving feedback. For example, and you may or may not have one, managers are typically not writers, but they do read work and give feedback, right? So your support people, those are the people that you want to go to. Those are the people that you want to rely on to get some feedback and then revise from those notes. Now, we're going to talk later this month about how to address feedback, how to address notes and keep your voice, and like which note to take and when to not take a note. When to take a note, when to not take a note. So we're going to be talking about that actually next week, so make sure that you also subscribe to this channel so that you get notified when I go live to talk about that. All right, so once you get feedback, you address the feedback, right? You refine it, you manage all the notes that you're going to take. Like I said, we'll talk about that next week. Then you don't have to do this, but I do think it is really, really helpful doing a table read. And if you can do a table read with actors, that's even better. Now, that is something that we do have in Black Screenwriter Alliance. Although it is a community for Black screenwriters, we do have a partnership with the Black Script and Making and Acting Studios, where they have actors who have opted in to participate in table reads so that you can actually hear, how is my script landing for people that might actually be acting in it, right? And this is important feedback. Table reads, while you can get, the step before this, getting feedback from people that you know, from people that you trust in terms of being able to articulate story and what's needed, what's not working, really important, all right? Doing a table read is going to give you two kinds of feedback. One, you will be able to get explicit feedback, asking questions, getting responses, what's working, what's not working, listening to the kinds of questions that people have, where you then realize like, oh, okay, so this part wasn't clear, I need to clarify this. Or, oh, this part was interpreted this way, and that's definitely not what I'm looking for, so I need to make some adjustments. That's explicit feedback that happens in the dialogue after the table read. The other kind of feedback is what you're going to get by actually listening to and watching your table read, even on Zoom, right? If you are writing a comedy and you have jokes that are not getting laughter, that's feedback. Nobody has to say that wasn't a funny line. You're going to know it's not funny because nobody laughed, right? If you're doing a table read and you're getting a lot of laughter in a part where you're like, this is not supposed to be funny, then that is also feedback. If you are listening to people read dialogue and they're really fumbling over it, that's also important feedback, because what you may put on the page when you're writing and you're hearing it in your head may not come out right when somebody is actually reading it. It may be awkward, it may be clunky, it may just be like kind of a tongue twister for people. So for example, my show Wicked City, when we do table reads before we start shooting the season, I always try to make sure that I am not reading any of the lines, because I need to hear how the actors are reading it, and if there is not on set. And some of it, like some shows, there's just kind of like tricky dialogue. Like the show Bones has like a lot of like scientific dialogue that they like fumbled over. But like they're talking, they're talking science. But if there's something where I'm like, oh, I can adjust that, or that came out really awkward, or they're really struggling with a line, then I can adjust that before we get to shoot, so that they can say the lines with more authenticity and with more genuineness. And that way it'll feel more natural, and their acting will be more natural in that moment as well. So these are things that you will learn from a table read. And we're going to talk more about table reads later this month as well. So again, make sure that you like this video and subscribe so that you know when we are going live. Um, so yes, it can be really helpful. Explicit feedback feedback, you get your implicit feedback from listening, from to feel like really, you get your I got to cut this down. You'll be able to feel things like that in a way that you don't when you are just reading it silently in your head. And how you might be thinking something is interpreted may be different than how it's actually interpreted on the page by someone else. So really, really important feedback that you can get from that. Now, again, you don't have to do it, and you don't have to do it with actors either. You could do a table read with your writer friends. You don't have to, but I do think that it is helpful. And like I said, in Black Screenwriter Alliance, you do have the option of being able to schedule your own table read and to do it with actors so that you can get that kind of really in-depth and nuanced feedback. So the other thing that I want to say about this, and we're going to talk about this more this month, is that revision, like I said, revision can feel daunting. I'm just checking the chats over here. Ever connected with the AFDB and Afromix Bank? I have not actually. Thank you for chiming in, but I have not. Okay, so yes. So, yes, I know it's a little choppy. It'll be smoother on replay. It's kind of an issue with the streaming service, but thank you for sharing. Thank you for letting me know. All right. So those are the steps that I would take when it comes to revision. The last thing that I want to say is that revision, like I said, revision is a heavy lift. That is often where you're going to spend the most of your time, possibly when it comes to the project, because even from actors, depending on the feedback, what actor you have, on what studio caliber of actor, there is going to be to learn how to take feedback, how to address feedback, how to also pick your battles. We'll later, but you also have to learn anywhere in this process that fear and doubt are going to rear their ugly ass heads. When you know that, you can prepare for it. And so it's important to understand that. It's important to remember that, because fear and doubt can show up in different ways. It can show up as procrastination. It can show up as perfectionism. It can show up as getting distracted by social media or this or that, or I have to do X, Y, and Z. It can show up as now you're working on another project and you ain't even finished your revision, so you don't have anything to pitch. It can show up as talking yourself out of taking chances on the page. It can show up as a lot of different things. And if you don't know what that looks like for you, you might be distracted and like, oh, here you're scrolling on social media and you don't even realize that doubt is what's happening. Doubt led you to pick up your phone. Doubt got you on social media because your brain wanted a distraction from the fear that was stirring up. And so it pulled you away from your script revision, which is where you want your attention to be, and it put you on something else, or it came up with some excuse, something else that you have to do, because it's trying to pull you away from the thing that's provoking your fear. Because fear is danger. And if I can pull you to something else like social media is safe, even though social media is like super dangerous. So it's really important to understand what your fear and your doubt looks like, and to develop the tools to address it so that you can keep moving forward with your vision, especially when you get to the point where people are waiting on your material, because you don't want to hold them up. You want to be able to execute, and you want to be able to execute quickly so that the train can keep moving. In television, whew, good Lord, this is really important because the train moves very, very, very fast. Episodes are due fast, revisions are due even faster, and you have to get out there because production is waiting. So that fear and doubt element, really important. I talked a lot what was it? Screenwriter's Mind. That might be the playlist, but honestly, you just scroll through and you can scroll through past lives and you will see all the different things I covered. I covered fear, I covered doubt, I covered imposter syndrome, I covered perfectionism, I covered writer's block. So all of these things are covered last month, and also how to change the narrative in your head, that narratives that's stirring up, that is like, you're not good enough for this, you can't make these changes, you're not going to have a good script by the end of this, all you're going to have is that garbage first draft. This is those are videos that are really going to help you with that. So I definitely encourage you to go watch those videos and make sure that you like and subscribe. We're gonna talk a little bit more about this later, as we go through the month, and how this specifically applies to the revision process. But we also talk about this and address this and giving it support within the community. So make sure that you join us in a Black Screenwriter Alliance. You can try it free for 7 days, blackscreenwriteralliance.mn.co. And we have literally, there are mindset resources in there, but there's also that community, and that support and connection is super important, especially as Black creators in this industry. And that is where you find your people who will give you feedback. That's where you find the people who, when you're in doubt or you're unmotivated or you're unfocused, they're like, yo, snap out of it. Like, you are brilliant. You need to get back to it. That is where you will find also those real relationships, those genuine relationships that will last you through your career, because relationship is how people get jobs. Relationship is how people get staffed. Relationship is how people get opportunity. So building these relationships now with other Black creators, Black film and TV writers, will open up opportunities for collaboration, open up opportunities for getting staffed, and open up opportunities for other connections with their people. Like, we all become a network for each other, but that's not built through like icky transactional networking. That is built through genuine connection and relationship building, and really being of support to other people. Because when you're support to other people, you are also open up to receiving support from people. So thank you guys for joining me. That's what I have for you today. Make sure you stick around. And thank you, Omar. Omar says great information with valuable insights. Thank you so much. Happy that this is helpful for you. So make sure that you like and subscribe, so that you check us out in Black Screenwriter Alliance at blackscreenwriteralliance.mn.co. Try it 7 days for free. It's a good time. We're building connections, building support. People have already got their writing groups in there, and there are people who have already actually reached out to producers who came in as guests. So it's a great time. And I will see you guys in the next live.